Hi, welcome back to Beyond the Boundary Road. I'm Jadine Croft, and joining me is our language researcher, Des Crump. Hi, Des.
Hello again.
Good to have you. For this final episode, we'll be discussing the overall future of language sustainability, as well as recapping the main topics raised over the season. So it's great to have you here, Des. We'll start off first by asking the question, what would be the approach in consulting with elders in regards to teaching and learning of the language?
Well, I think it's important, elders and traditional custodians, those people who have the knowledge and that traditional connection to the land, that they're actively involved in any language revival process, whether it's the teaching or whether it's having to reclaim that language if it's nearly lost. And so ideally you'd have a language reference group, and the elders, traditional custodians, the speakers, anybody who has that language knowledge would be part of that reference group to help guide the project.
Yeah. So who's eligible to learn the language?
Well, again, that's a decision for the community. I think I mentioned earlier about the community maybe wanting to develop up their own language skills, and then look at bringing in other people to be part of that learning, whilst others are more freely and quite happy for everybody in the community to be learning and finding out about their language.
Yeah. How do you think we can engage school students?
Well, I think the national curriculum coming out, I think that might be an important platform where schools and communities can work together and develop up some programs and have it being taught formally within a school setting. Other areas, I think, probably the need to develop community training, and so whether that's done at the school level so that they can train up community people to become teacher aides and language teachers within any program, but there's certainly a need there for the community to be involved in that teaching and learning part of it.
Yeah, definitely. So what are the other Indigenous nations of the world doing to revitalise their respective languages, and how can we incorporate their methods into our own?
Well, the good thing is, particularly now, there's a lot of sharing that does take place in international conferences on language, and as well as through the internet and the resources that are available there. And so a lot of the good ideas that are being used in Queensland and Australia, a lot of those were initially developed over in the States, particularly with the First Nations there, where they reviving some of their traditional languages, the Navajo, the Inuit, Cherokee nations and so on. And so some of their techniques, such as the Master's Apprentice, is being used over here.
Yeah. So can you just explain for us the Master Student program?
Yeah, so with that, like it suggests, there's a master, so usually that's an elder or a custodian, someone who has that rich language knowledge and cultural knowledge, and then there's a student or an apprentice who works alongside them. And so in the States, that was very successful, where they had identified masters or elders within the First Nation groups, the tribes there, and they would choose young people to come out and spend time with them. It might be a weekend every month, or it might be a 1 week solid block, and during that time they're with the master or the elder. The only language they use is that traditional language. So I think there's a real opportunity for Australia to take on that sort of process, particularly where we still have those elders who have that language knowledge.
Yeah. So Des, how do you think we could implement something like that?
Well, I know the Australian government, with their review into Aboriginal languages and Torres Strait Islander languages being taught in communities, they did suggest a couple of processes or strategies, like the Master's Apprentice and the Language Nest was the other one that they highlighted in their review, to say here's some processes, some strategies that work really well overseas. We'll encourage communities to take those on over here, and hopefully there'll be some resourcing to follow through with that, so that the communities can take it on and trial it for themselves.
Yeah. So Des, how is the State Library engaging with the communities?
Well, one of the things we have is the research workshops, where we hold them once a year. In the past we've run 2 a year, but now we have 1 a year held at the State Library, where we bring people in and they undertake research into the collections. And then the other times we usually do 2, maybe 3, sometimes even 4 workshops out in the communities, and so we take the material out to them so that they can access it, but also spend some time researching and learning some new skills in acquiring language. The other process we have is through the Indigenous Knowledge Centres, so there's 21 of those across Queensland, particularly in the remote communities, the Torres Strait Islands, and they're working with their local communities, training people up in language knowledge, documenting stories, creating virtual books, digital stories, those electronic resources as well.
Yeah. So is the language workshop, are they a closed workshop, or can anyone come in and participate?
No, it's an open one. We the only restriction we really have is just usually we try to have around 30 people maximum because of the space in the library, but also the resourcing that's available to run those workshops and to spend time with each person individually and help them with their research, because over the course of the 3-4 days each person is researching their own language, and sometimes they might be researching 4 or 5 languages that are in their community. So if we have too many, we find we can't give them the benefit of the state library staff working alongside them to help them find the research and the language material that they need to find.
Yeah. And what type of role should the young generation have to play? Like, do you think they're well informed about the language revitalisation?
Again, it depends on the community, but I think young people are certainly the future for communities, particularly with the technology that's now available to help with language revival. Having the young people involved in the recording, the documentation, all that IT side, and marrying that knowledge that they have with the elders and the custodians, those people who have that traditional and cultural knowledge there. And I think that's the way to go for a lot of communities when they're looking at that language revival across their communities now.
Yeah, well, that's all we have for language revitalisation. Thank you so much, Des, for being on the show. It's been great having you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, to cap off our discussion, I now would like to give Des the honour of saying farewell to you all in Gamilaroi. Take it away, Des.
Oh, thank you. Yalu gabaninadali winanalani nay.
That's all for language revitalisation this season. I'd like to thank you for joining us in learning about sustaining language, a critical aspect in all of our cultures, and hope you enjoyed it. Stay with Beyond the Boundary Road right after this break.